Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning. Scott Luton and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's episode. Greg, how are we doing?
I'm doing quite well, Scott. And as you can see, I am completely unbiased in this discussion.
Well, hey, it's a small world, and this conversation reflects some of that. But I'm really excited to meet with a founder and a company that is truly on the move, and that's what this episode is going to focus on. And for that matter, an industry that continues every day to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So Our guest here today, Greg, is not new to you and I, but we're really excited of sharing his perspective and expertise with our community. Earlier in his career, our guest spent valuable time at big name companies such as Manhattan Associates and Genuine Parts Company. And just over 4 years ago, he founded an enterprise supply chain software company built specifically for the growing cannabis industry. And by growing, that doesn't do it justice. It's exploding. And the company has been mirroring the industry. They've been really exploding in growth ever since. So let's welcome in Colton Griffin, CEO with Flourish Software. Colton, how you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Scott.
It is so neat. It's so neat to sit down after having collaborated and rubbed elbows with you in the Atlanta area and in supply chain circles, to be able to sit down and reconnect with you and Greg and just get an update on all the cool things that you're up to. So I've really been studying you from afar. I'm not creeping on you or, but it really, I mean, the industry in itself is such a fascinating one, and it'd be cool to get an update on your story here today.
Yeah, I don't think there's any more exciting thing to be part of than the rollout of legalized cannabis and the explosion of hemp and CBD around the country.
Awesome.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right. So on that note, Greg, you ready to dive right in?
Let's do this. I talk to Colton all the time, so I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but let's do it.
All right. So as I mentioned, Colton is not new to our team here. We've enjoyed our work together, but we want to kind of assume that many other folks in our listening audience and community haven't had a chance to get to know Colton. So I'm going to start from the beginning. Colton, tell us, where you grew up and give us a couple of stories from your upbringing.
Yeah, I grew up in East Tennessee, between Knoxville and Chattanooga, near a small town called Athens and Inglewood. And I went to University of Tennessee, got an industrial engineering degree after I was really fortunate to go to the high school, Baylor in Chattanooga, and got an amazing high school education. Just, you don't know where life is going to take you. And after getting out of UT, I landed at Manhattan Associates, which is a software company, and I knew nothing about software, but orientation was just a plunge into this world that I've fully embraced over the last almost 10 years now. So it's been a wild ride with a couple twists and turns, but yeah, that's where it all started, was somewhere far away from the computer.
So let me back up a minute. There's an Athens, Tennessee, is that right?
Yes.
And it's is it Inglewood County, Tennessee?
McMinn County.
Oh, McMahon. I thought you said Inglewood.
That's the little town I grew up in.
Oh, little town.
And so Inglewood, you grew up in a suburb of Athens, Tennessee.
I grew up in the county, so it wasn't in the city limits of the 3,500 people that lived in that small town I went.
Gotcha. Well, Inglewood is never up to any good, as we all know. But it'd be I had to throw that in. One of my favorite songs of all time. But so
that's Colton, a different Inglewood, but
it is.
That one's right down the street now.
Very close to right now, as a matter of fact.
I am.
So Colton, what Greg's going to kind of take us through your professional side, but backing up as a kid or teenager, what have you, early student, what was it about computers, technology in general? Do you remember your earliest moment where you're like, hey, this is what I'm going to do?
Well, it wasn't computers, I don't think. So I definitely, grew up as the age of the internet has sort of grown up, right? So I spent plenty of time online, and I don't know. I look back and I realize how fortunate I was to have access to so much information like so early, right? Like even 10, 12, 13 years old, and then, went to school 14 through, through high school, like, news and ideas, and, YouTube didn't come online until like 2007, I don't think. So that was like really, like I was kind of out of school almost at that point. But but yeah, I mean, I always loved building things. I think when I was younger, I thought maybe I'll be an architect. I guess now I'm building software, architecting software. So, some of that creativity is still there. And I actually, ended up going for an engineering degree after I did a project in high school to make biodiesel. And we made biodiesel from oil, like cooking oil, and it was like a fun project. We built this whole thing to do it. And it was, a lot about putting things together. And it was like, hey, this, engineering is like this translatable hard skill you always going to have a career and job in. And so, maybe you can go get an MBA later, and you may as well just go ahead and go for an engineering degree. That's how I ended up there.
So one final question before I toss over to Greg here. So we talked about your mom pre-show. It sounds like she was really supportive as you were exploring, technology, engineering, architecture, even if it wasn't the George Costanza type of architecture. She was really supportive of what you were experimenting with.
Totally.
Right?
Both my parents have always been. My mom graduated high school, moved to Texas, and started welding in the nuclear power industry way back when. That was definitely not a career path for women at the time. But she fell into it, and my parents worked nuclear construction early on, even before I was around, and that's how we landed in Tennessee, because it's the last plant they built for 20 years or so. It was the TVA plant, and my dad ended up working for himself, just like an independent business owner. When I was growing up. And my mom sort of took a step back and took care of us kids, and then got back to the workforce as we got a little older. So she was just wrapped up some work at Vogel there in Georgia, and
Right.
yeah,
Love it. All right, so Greg, where are we going next?
Well, we've learned about your childhood, Colton, and some of your early days, and strangely, Scott, Colton and I never really met, but we actually competed for a time, arguably, right? When you were at Manhattan.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we came together to work together at Flourish as well. So tell us a little bit about, before you got to Flourish, before you founded Flourish, tell us a little bit about some of the roles that you had, some of the things that you did that fit so well into what you're doing at Flourish, and how that shaped your professional career, and maybe even, some of your worldview and management styles.
Certainly. I landed at Manhattan Associates out of school, which is, best of breed supply chain software. I think probably most of the listeners are familiar with Manhattan. Awesome company. They recruit from UT and other schools around the region. And I landed in a group called the Supply Chain Intelligence Group, which was like a 10-person team of the 700-person professional services practice, focused on all the reporting and analytics on top of all the projects. So, I remember, in orientation, one of our first exercises was like to create a test script. And I honestly had zero idea of what they were talking about. And, it's your first day, essentially your probably first, second day of work. And, you're like, test script. And what that was like, a lot of times as a junior implementation engineer, you're like going through the software and making sure it functions as expected, which is probably not why I went to go to school. But I was very fortunate, and our team, we really just did like the analytics and reporting, and we owned the project from end to end. So like within the first month or two, I found myself in the server, green screen, installing software on like Linux machines, in the database, learned SQL like in a week, doing all the data prep and analysis, and then, talking to stakeholders that were deploying, warehouse management, order management, inventory management systems, the Manhattan software, like to understand everything they needed to get past just making the software function. So it was like you were managing, 5 or 6 projects at any given time. And they were quick projects that you would come in and out of. So, like the last year I worked in Manhattan, I worked in 10 different states, and I only traveled maybe 50% of the time, or less. So it was a lot of great exposure across their whole portfolio, which meant, understanding how the data flowed through the supply chain, what all the functionality is, and then really what the business problems you're trying to solve with it were. I don't think we could have asked for like a better exposure to what was happening in the world of supply chain and technology.
Yeah, no doubt. And, it's funny when you look back on that and you look at the recognition that supply chain has now. Do you feel like you're an OG in supply chain? Even with your timing of starting in supply chain, it still feels like that to me.
To some degree. It just continued to get more and more and more attention. Maybe it's because we live in this world, but I feel like it's much more heightened, awareness of like the role and the language, and, technology just is eating up every piece of it. So, it's crazy.
So from Manhattan, you went to Genuine Parts, and that sort of was the catalyst for Flourish. So share with us how that sort of evolved into what you're doing today.
Yeah, I, like great experience in Manhattan. I was having fun there and continuing to just innovate and do my thing. And I got, a call from a recruiter. I remember I was on a project for a client I won't go name that was dealing with a lot of issues, like millions of dollars a day of issues that I had to go up and help with as part of like a SWAT team. And, it was just like 12-hour days, it just was a long week, and, trying to fix some problems, get some visibility of the problems. And a recruiter called and said, "Hey, I got this awesome opportunity for you." And it's like, okay, tell me more. So I walked across it was literally GPC's office for shared services literally across the woods from Manhattan. So it's like the next driveway. And I landed there, and then I suddenly found myself owning it, like not just owning the project, but owning everything. Right. So I built out all their capabilities for supply chain reporting analytics. Ultimately, we deployed that to like 120 or so distribution centers, and then we on top of their inventory optimization suites, so multiple billions of dollars in purchasing, and on top of their trade management system. And it's like a whole different experience being inside the client versus the contractor or the consultant coming out. And I think it was a great opportunity to learn and just hone the skills. And then at a certain point, you got the itch. I got the itch to get out of the cubicle and build something a little bit bigger. So we originally, when I stepped out, it was, consulting in this domain expertise, which is very specialized and important, and doing some consulting projects. And we originally were wanted to productize like the knowledge that I've been working on, right? So we wanted to build an analytics platform for distribution centers and for supply chain ops, which was, I think, a great concept and a great consulting business. But the enterprise sale to those type of customers for software was a whole different animal that so we fell into cannabis like a little bit by accident, and this has been very rewarding, and applying all that knowledge and all that experience to an industry that sorely needs it,
and is not nearly as advanced, right, in its supply chain understanding as what you came from, right?
No, we're leading the what's the analogy? Maybe like leading the horse to water. Maybe like we're trying to just nudge it all in the right direction and put the frameworks in place, and we've like super rapid development. We release new features every other week. I mean, we're constantly just listening to our customers and trying to guide our customers on how to adopt, mobile scanning and, like, of all things, I did this week Pick-to-Light demo with a light Pick-to-Light solution.
Really?
We're thinking about doing a pilot for one of our larger distribution clients, which we're even getting ready to start having some proven integrations to some material handling. So who would have thought that? But this industry it's a rocket ship, and like we're trying to figure out like how do you handle 5 to 10 times more volume for clients that are on that trajectory to get there, and that's where this knowledge comes into play.
I love that. If I can interject for a minute, and a question really to both of y'all, because I think maybe a lot of folks are listening to this interview, they may not be aware of some of the unique challenges that the cannabis industry has that further complicate, every sector of industry has its own, unique elements, but some may be surprised by what the cannabis industry has to overcome. Colton or Greg, can y'all share just a couple of those?
I think we skipped right over diving into what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
So
yes.
Go for that, because I think the applications and how you've applied your knowledge of data extraction and reporting and analytics, I think that goes really powerfully to the question that Scott asked.
So, we built an end-to-end platform to handle the inventory management, the purchasing, the order fulfillment, and then in cultivation, we track the cultivation life cycle of all the plants and the harvest, and then we also handle manufacturing processes. So we track like the assemblies and the extraction runs and inputs and outputs for the yields, and then we even went as far as to extend into the retail point of sale. So we have a nice retail point of sale and retail delivery module. Because a lot of operators in cannabis are vertically integrated, meaning they own the production all the way through the retail sales. And then a lot of our customers, so retail's very crowded in this industry, happy to go into that if we want to, but we really mostly focus on the upstream supply chain software. So all the production and the cultivation and the warehouse management. And a lot of those customers still like may grow their own stuff, and also like they manufacture and distribute, and then we do have like pure play distributors that just distribute on brands. And in cannabis, so all this has sort of been solved in other industries, so like why do we need like special software for this? The cannabis like regulations require, let's say, cultivation, us to tag all the plants like at conception. Generally we're tagging them in like groups when they're a couple inches high, and then we're splitting them out as they get 6 inches, 12 inches high, and we're putting an individual tag on every single plant, and we're tracking that through the phase of its growth cycle, and then we're consuming that into a harvest and tracking all the weight that comes off of those plants. And we do both indoor grows, greenhouses, and outdoor grows. And then all of that harvest material is then tagged to essentially like license plate numbers, probably the term would be most familiar, to package IDs is what we call them. So every piece of inventory in the 4 walls that has cannabis in it has a tag on it. And then everything has this auditability and this traceability from where it came from. So we're splitting it into something else, consuming it into something else. And it's just like a absolutely ridiculous level of specificity that we have to handle. And so all that is its own animal, but to just make it a little bit more complicated, we also have to sync up in most states with all that data to some software the states have licensed, the governments have licensed to provide some visibility to them. So the dominant provider in like about 14 states is a program called METRIC. I think it's Marijuana Enforcement Tracking and Compliance Software is the acronym they came up with in Colorado when Colorado went legal and needed some piece of software to help prevent diversion. And so they came up with this insane tracking. Really, that business makes all its money selling those tags. So they're making a fortune, and it's a horrible interface and a horrible API, and it causes all its own
It is exactly what you would expect of a government system. I mean,
yeah, and it's not,
unreliable.
the government
It's
didn't build it, so it's just
inefficient. Yeah.
it's a contracted system even. So the government doesn't even have to take ownership over it. They just have to, they just like, well, it's their problem. And they're like, well, it's not in our contract. Our customer is government. And so we interface to that in real time to keep everybody above board. So it's just lots and lots of details. And we're in about, I think about 17 states now. We do service hemp, which doesn't have the ridiculous level of tracking, but they have the same workflows and they still have to have provenance tracking and understand the lab testing and stuff like that. But yeah, every state has its own flavor of little details that will get you if you don't engineer things properly.
And I think that, Scott, to your point, I think that is the uniqueness of this industry. On one end, you have a very, very fledgling industry, frankly, literally street dealers coming out of the woodwork to become legitimate merchants, right? And you have a lot of naivete of traditional business. You have a lot of distrust of government, and yet you have this incredible amount of government oversight, not just the state that you operate in, but you also can't do some things that would violate federal law because, of course, the federal law actually usurps state law. And if you violate federal law, you go to prison. So the stakes are very, very high here. And then you have what Colton has described, and that is this incredible amount of accountability, of tracking. You used one of our favorite words, Colton, provenance, and accountability in the supply chain, and the incredibly complex nature of laws, where the laws in Colorado are different than the laws in California, and even in some states, I think it was Colorado a few years back, 180 law changes in a single year. So you've got a very fluid environment as well with all of this regulation. You've got onerous tax requirements, upwards of 40+% taxes by the states. So the states have a lot of the motivation for legalization is this cash grab of taxes against the states, which motivates some producers to kind of ride the razor's edge of legal and reported product growth, distribution, and sale, and some that's not as legal or reported growth, distribution, and sale. And squarely in the middle of it are technologies. I don't know if I would call, well, we have to call metric a technology, an ancient technology like metric, and then advanced technologies like what Flourish is doing to assure that the state gets its accountability, to assure that the product gets to the marketplace, does so in legal and accountable fashion, and also provides oversight to the government. So, gosh, even saying it again, Colton, makes it seem overwhelming, doesn't it?
Yes.
Well, it's a little overwhelming.
Let me ask this question as the non-technologist in this panel here. So metric is what I heard here is Flourish software does not replace metric, but it enables folks to work better and easier with this metric technology that isn't the most cutting edge, is what I'm hearing, to put it nicely, maybe.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Exactly. And, so metric is really tracking the movement of inventory, but let's just say if you're doing all of this data entry and keeping all this data, maybe your sales orders are also important. And the price of the inventory and the ingredients that went into the inventory, right? So like
and how much it's selling and where and
all
whether
that.
you're making any profit, all of those things are right. All of those things are not provided by metric, and they're also not provided by the predominant ERP or accounting providers in the industry. I mean, QuickBooks is one of the most predominant accounting softwares, and it can't provide you with that, just like it can't in any other industry.
Yeah, and we'll send invoices back to QuickBooks to reconcile the book, with the financials, and it's a great part of the kind of the proven tech stack that we commonly deploy with. But yeah, we got to keep metric and we got to keep the state happy and give them what they need to, to get in and out of an inspection. And then, but like we really, from day one, have focused on providing software that helps people run their business better, make decisions, have visibility, capture what went in, what went out, like use tech to actually grow the business. And
imagine that.
This is something we've been working on at Flourish, is the so what. So what does Flourish mean to a company? It means they remain in compliance. It means they do so by making as much profit as possible while complying, and that they have this visibility that Colton has made his career. They have this visibility that allows them to change on the fly, to plan for the future, and to respond to disruptions that occur in the moment. So it's a really powerful piece of technology that closes the gap between just simply complying and simply growing, creating product and selling it, to what does all of that mean? And I think one of the fascinating things about this industry is that this model of compliance, of understanding provenance, of assuring that the product is where it needs to be, literally, you have to account for the parts of the product that you do use to make product, and also for the parts of the product that you don't use. For instance, stems and things like that. Oils that come out of the product, you're accountable for that down to microns. And it is a very, very highly regulated industry. And just think of the kids you knew in high school that were entrepreneurs. Probably not their strong suit, some of these things. And these are the people who are running a lot of these companies, and they are evolving rapidly.
Right.
It's not that they're unintelligent. They were just undisciplined before. They are evolving to this maturity level, and it's incredible. So I'm curious. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
Just a quick editorial or information nugget. The industry, the sentiments in the industry is also rapidly evolving, which is creating more and more headroom for it to grow. Yeah. And you look at a variety of projections, just like we've seen Canada legalize it for full recreational use. It's not going to be very far behind when we're going to see a lot more states and perhaps the U.S. government make it much easier, not just for regardless of the purpose for citizens who use cannabis. You're going to see regulatory action, from what I see, make it easier to do business in the industry. So that makes entrepreneurs and investors and everyone else take a lot more notice, it seems, of this industry. And really, as a supply chain geek anyway, it's fascinating to hear both of y'all speak about kind of the supply chain operations, logistics, and the retail aspect of this vastly, rapidly evolving business opportunity. So thank y'all both for the quick education.
$90 billion market
right.
is what it's minimum.
Yeah. I mean, some of the larger projections, which make my career understanding, right? Some of the larger projections are that cannabinoid based products, will start to replace things like energy drinks, or start to approach those industries. Healthcare products, health and beauty aids, things like that. Over a $2.5 trillion industry, all of that, and cannabis products will start to overtake that.
Well, so I got to share this quick anecdote. We were out the last in-person event that I attended was the Denska conference out in Arizona. Greg, as you and I know, we chatted about it 1,000 times out in Arizona, and I'm getting dropped off at the airport by, the driver, Uber driver. And as I get out, this guy approaches me for a free sample of a cannabis product. And right over his shoulder are a couple of cops. And look, I don't know where the rules are wherever I am, right? So I was kind of hesitant, but I grabbed it, and then I saw a cop approach. I'm like, oh gosh, this is just what I needed.
Just got set up, right?
Well, yeah. The cop goes, hey, can I get a sample of that? And for that one little moment, it was like, just the proliferation of the benefits and the health benefits of various products. So It's really intriguing as an entrepreneur to see this explosion, and we're just getting started, it seems. I mean, this
We
time
are.
next year is going to be looking a lot different than here we are today. So
Well,
fascinating.
I want to ask Colton a question about some of the surprising things of the industry. But before I do that, I want to share one of my major surprises. So we had a board meeting in December of 2019, Colton, in Las Vegas at a trade show called MJ BizCon.
Mhm.
I'd never been to MJ BizCon. As I told many people before, I wasted my youth not getting wasted. So I'm a bit naive when it comes to the industry, and even working daily with Flourish, I'm a bit kind of extracted from what the industry is and what it means. I walk in the front door of this thing, and what I expect is not what I saw. What I saw was a miniature processing plant for cannabis products that looked like it could have been in a Procter and Gamble or a Johnson and Johnson medical facility, right? I mean, it was impressive, incredible. It is a mature and an incredibly strong industry. And the other thing I saw was people my grandmother's age who are in the industry and who have been long-time industry advocates and long-time industry activists. It is a serious, serious business. It is not the kid down the street growing weed in his basement. Certainly there is an aspect of that exists, but it is a very serious business. And there is a lot of research going into it. There is a lot of analysis going into it. There's a lot of breeding. And as somebody from a farm state, Kansas, all of the breeding and crossbreeding, and having maybe past Kansas has had some alternate crops over the years. I may have taken a little bit of buckshot in the hind end running through one of those fields once or twice, but having seen, how that works, that was one of the most surprising things for me. There's another thing. One, I'd like you to start by sharing, Colton, and then share some of the other things that folks might not be aware of. But first, I want you to share what you think is really surprising about the industry, but please start with how many states have legalized in one form or fashion, and what we're seeing or you're seeing in terms of future legalizations on the cusp in the United States.
Almost hard to keep track. We just had 2 yesterday,
Right.
New York and New Mexico. So I think we're about 35. I think there's about 35 states where you can legally go into a shop and buy either medicinal or adult use, recreational cannabis. So it's like the majority of the United States at this point.
Right.
Now, that being said, there's we're still very early in how much is actually available, right? So
Right.
There's a lot of different models and how states have been rolling this out, and some states are very limited programs, some states limited licenses, others are much further along, and even states like California that was the first, and I think 96 to allow medical marijuana, was still maybe only 20% of the industry is actually in the market at this point. 80% still in the shadows. So we're just seeing double-digit compounding growth year over year, and it's mind-boggling how quick things are changing. Obviously when laws change, then you have to raise capital and find a site and do the build out and hire a team and do the production. So it doesn't just happen overnight. Although I will say we've been doing a lot and stuff in Arizona. Arizona voted in adult use in November in the elections, and they flipped the switch a couple months ago. I mean, there was like 4 months. They had a healthy medical industry, and it's been great. That's actually a state that we love working in because they don't have that metric system. They just have logical reporting. So we track everything to the same degree, but you can just produce a report, and the regulators there are happy with that, not having to pay a ridiculous amount of money to stick a plastic tag on everything that goes through. At least that level of plastic tag and interface with it gives them a little bit more flexibility to just run the business. But yeah, we're seeing movement in every state, and internationally as well. I mean, talking to people in South Africa about, there's a Lesotho, a kingdom in the center of South Africa that has like 300 cannabis farms that are
Right.
getting ready to open and in some form of opening. It's just there's movement like in dozens of countries around the world where people are starting to set up, the local economies, and it's truly a global phenomenon.
Love it.
I think that's probably as surprising as anything is how global it is, right? I mean, in the States, even in North America, we tend to think of it in terms of our own, not small, but our own sort of limited purview, but it is a global phenomenon. And if you count CBD, then it is CBD, which contains less than you need to check me on this, Colton, 0.3% THC, correct?
That for the hemp plant, yeah. The
Yeah.
CBD would just be the CBD itself. Yeah.
So that is that's legal in virtually every state in the nation right now, and that is the sort of channel to make creating legality of the THC product.
So in 2018, the Farm Bill blessed cultivation of hemp, which is low THC cannabis. It's the same plant, it's just different chemical compound in it. Looks the same, smells the same, and that sparked the CBD craze that and unlocked that to the market. So we have a good book of business in that. Over the last couple of years that we've grown some really advanced clients that came from ag and tobacco and or traditional farming, and have grown and have put together really cool processing plants and models together to produce hemp cigarettes and CBD, extracted CBD to put in all these consumer products. And it's a pretty neat business itself. It also is helping us make sure we're ready for federal legalization, right? We're already working with people that are doing trade across the country and are operating under GMP and sort of guidance and stuff like that. That's setting the bar for what cannabis is going to look like as things open up over the next couple of years.
So you all have been really successful in terms of establishing a presence in the marketplace, in terms of creating a niche for yourself, and in growing the business and acquiring investment. So I think it would be great if you could share some of that journey, and maybe a little bit. I'd love for you to give a couple, 3 takeaways for other entrepreneurs or other founders and startups that they could use to help grow their business, regardless of what industry they're in, but certainly technology. What jumps to mind there?
So many things. You got to do it to learn it. First of all, I would say, test your idea early and often. You need to establish the willingness for people to pay for what you're doing, and understand that the market is there, right? You can build the coolest widget in the world, but if nobody wants to give you money for it, it's not going to pan out. So learned some of that early on when we were doing the analytics stuff about what they would pay for and what they wouldn't pay for, and I would just say proofs of concepts, customer discovery, and then getting those checks written is just key early on. So you make sure that you don't want to spend a year working on something and realizing that there's not a market for it. And ultimately investors are looking for those proof points as well. They want to see there's a lot of ways to like prove that, right? Like adoption, like volumes going through the platform, like engagements, and dollars revenue. I mean, it doesn't always have to be dollars. Sometimes you can have a monetization second strategy in certain industries. That's okay.
Yeah.
But you got to show, customer traction and interest like early as possible. So that's one. Fundraising always takes conservatively twice as long as you want it to. So start early.
That is a great one right there. Yeah.
You gotta stay ahead of that. I mean, that is ultimately, if you're in the CEO seat, that's your job, to make sure there's gas in the tank, and start building those relationships. Investors want to invest in people that they know, that they've tracked, that have, some level of, confidence, right? Like, you're not going to give $1 million to a stranger you met on the street. You want to develop a little bit of rapport, have an idea of who you want to be working with, give them updates, get on the radar, and cultivate that relationship until, so when you're ready to make the ask, they're also aware and excited about what it can be in. I'd say that's an efficient way to make the fundraising process go a little smoother. And then it's all about the team. So hire slow and smart and fire fast, and like you're not going to do it all yourself. So be ready to hand off the things that you can hand off, and empower your team. And it really, especially the first couple of years, it's about having the right team around you. It's you got to have folks that can put in the time when you need to put in the time, and have the drive, and communication is key. We all went remote in COVID, so we've all adjusted to that, but that is like, that's it. If customers like the idea and they're willing to pay for it, and you have what you need to invest in it, it's about the people at the end of the day to deliver it.
Love that. Man, it's a ton of very practical, been there, done that advice, Greg. And clearly a ton of lessons learned in the first about 4 years of Flourish, right? 4 years and 2 or 3 months, I believe. Yep. Who's counting though?
Who's counting?
And a ton of as many unique elements to the journey of Flourish's own. Still, there's a ton of common threads with any entrepreneurial journey. And so I appreciate you taking time to share some of those key lessons learned for folks that may be listening, whether they're early stage already or founders already, or they really want to be those entrepreneurs. So one of my favorite questions to ask, Colton, and you've kind of shed some light kind of along the way here, but what lies ahead for a company on the move like Flourish?
Well, ag tech is a $30 billion software market, is what I think a lot of analysts look at. At least that's just part of what we do. That's not just warehouse management. It's a lot of the cultivation and connection of the farm to the market. We're just relentlessly focused on, owning cannabis and hemp, feeling like we're an early mover in the hemp. So we're helping be that mover there, and, just executing every single day on cannabis, and, and looking at the bigger picture and how we help provide this level of access to technology to folks that haven't traditionally had it, in a way that they can adopt it and drive value, and ultimately provide a lot more security and value to the supply chain, right? Like the traceability and the ability for people to connect to the market, and and handle this stuff at scale. Everything is going. Technology is ingrained in everything we do, and what we do on a day-to-day basis is no different. So it's maybe not things that have traditionally been super tech heavy, and there's certain pieces that have been already digitized, but I think a lot of stuff that we're working on is still early. And beauty about what we're doing here is just the government's forcing you to use all this technology, so we're figuring out how to make that work at scale, and work in a cost efficient way. So
Love it.
I don't know. We have a big product, and we love doubling down on cool product features and solutions and integrations and all that. And that's really what we're doing.
Relentless Colton Griffin. Well, some of our listeners, most of them may not know that in our earliest days, really what preceded Supply Chain Now, as we were experimenting in our little neck of the woods of digital content and what folks were interested in and how they chose to engage and lean into content to get better and to gather market intel. Colton was kind enough to be on a couple of those early webinar sessions. And Colton, I brought the pictures of, no, I'm just kidding. I've shared a couple of pictures with Greg, but I swear Colton doesn't age. And we told him this pre-show, he does not age. I'm so jealous of his genes, but I appreciate your willingness to collaborate in those early days and the predecessors to what has become Supply Chain Now. And, it's so neat to see where, someone that is putting in the hard work and innovating and experimenting and putting themselves out there, because we all know the risk that comes with being an entrepreneur, and just to see where Flourish is now and as tickled as we all can be to where you're headed. So we'll hope to have you back as the space continues to evolve and as Flourish continues to evolve as well. But before we let you go, I want to get you, we've talked a lot about the cannabis industry and we've got two wonderful sources of information here for that, but let's go a little bit broader here. There's no shortage of news and developments, innovations, challenges, you name it, as we look at global business and global supply chain. What's one or two items that you're tracking right now more than others?
I mean, intersection of consumer tech and B2B enterprise tech. Folks are not putting up with, they just have a whole different expectation of what technology looks and feels like and how they interact with it on a day-to-day basis, which is exciting, but maybe a little scary for legacy operators that look at a code base that's 20 or 30 years old and figuring out how to keep that up to speed. I think, one of our key differentiators in the market is around integrations. So, a very e-commerce first or marketplace first, thought process on how people are getting to market. And, you see a lot of success with some companies doing integrations and APIs. And that connectivity and the specialization of little functions but how it all pulls together, is a trend that's definitely not slowing down. And then, those are two big things that are happening. And, supply chain is no longer a siloed organization. It's the whole business for, for billions and billions and billions of dollars of industries, right? You don't the Instagram influencer selling whatever they're selling on Instagram. It's a supply chain business at the end of the day. Yeah. It's marketing and sales and brand, but it's all tech and fulfillment on the back end, and where that, and we're doing cool 3PL and 4PL capabilities for our customers, and in cannabis, which is kind of cool and crazy, but look at everything that we interact with. Look at Apple. Apple has a huge supply chain. Tech companies have supply chain, retail is supply chain, food is supply chain. It all.
Your chicken sandwich has a supply chain, folks.
It does, and it's a big topic, but it's cool. I think we all have to challenge ourselves to think about how, on a planet of 7 billion people, we're connected, and there's a lot of emerging economies and emerging talent in the world that is all going to be plugged into something that's very interconnected.
Well said. I think some of what you touched on there, consumers have record-setting levels of leverage these days, and that's a great thing. It's an empowering thing for all consumers and supply chain practitioners. They're the sought after, not commodities, but sought after talent and experts, and it's great for the industry or the craft, as Greg has put it. Before we pick Colton's brain on the Eureka moment, Greg, what did you hear Colton just share there?
Well, I have additional context, but I think what I really heard Colton share is what I think are some of his greatest gifts. One, he has an incredible vision for not just his product and his company, but for the marketplace itself. Colton is a collaborator. The number of companies that Flourish is working with and working with, to create an ecosystem that provides a really, really powerful solution set for companies in this industry is astounding. I still remember we were at the Wynn in Vegas around that board meeting, and you probably remember they were moving machines from one section of the casino to the other. And as we stood there after we had wrapped up our meeting for what seemed like an hour, what we were talking about was the collaborations and the integrations and the partnerships that the company was embracing. So that is definitely a gift, and that is a real time now time gift, because you can't do it alone. No solution, as Colton, you said, supply chain is no longer siloed. Technology is no longer siloed. It's not worth it to create a technology that does everything. Hey, Scott, this is nothing to sneeze at.
Sorry, I thought I was on mute. My apologies.
No, you were.
Okay.
But you're also on camera. But anyway, so there's so much interaction in the world today, and I think that's a really important gift. And the other is that Colton has an incredible gift for product. He hears what the marketplace says, as he alluded to before. He responds to it. He knows how to respond to it effectively and create an effective solution that solves the problem. And that's one of the things that has gotten Flourish over the line with so many of their clients, is not only do they hear the problem, but they know how to solve the problem. And I think one of the gifts and one of the advantages that Flourish has is they are truly advanced supply chain tech experts. Colton and Bennett and Juan, three of the co-founders, are incredibly gifted supply chain experts, and they bring an unfair advantage of supply chain expertise and analytical expertise to a marketplace where most of the technology providers are industry focused first. They know the industry, but they may not know best practice and the ability to bring that in. So those are some of the gifts, obviously, that Colton has, and of course that I think Flourish has. And I mean, that's why we're all so excited about what they're doing and see such great things in the future of this company.
Love it. All right. So before the pollen gets me again there, Colton, let's talk.
You remember that, don't you, Colton? It's that time of year, right?
It is that time of year.
So no shortage of eureka moments, right? We have them every day, every hour sometimes. In the last 18 months in particular, we've learned a lot as a society and as a profession, as leaders, as entrepreneurs. What's one eureka moment fairly recently, Colton, that comes to mind for you?
So a concept of talent density, which I just love. I was reading this Netflix No Rules book by Reid Hoffman, and it was just like, yes, this is how I'm thinking about things. This is it. I mean, there was a lot I got out of that book. It was just a cool book. But the first chapter is all around talent density. They, Netflix early on, did a layoff years ago, and found that after that they had a very strong, a stronger team, and they were putting out more, and they were putting out more with less people. And this concept of having really, really smart people working together, feeding off each other, really producing, stellar results and outperforming a team that's bigger. And I was reading that the other week, and it clicked in a good way. And I thought it was such an important concept that I just hadn't had it verbalized, I guess, or framed. As we've looked at our team and what how we're hiring and building out the team and the teams within the teams, that concept, it was I think it resonated well.
Yeah, talent density. I mean, there's a reason why part of your neck of the woods, certainly here in Atlanta, and other geographic centers of technology talent, and it's fueling the growth and the opportunity in those neck of the woods. However, on the flip side, we're getting closer and closer as a global community these days, right? We're working. It's been really neat as an entrepreneur on our end to work with people really across the globe, and to try to pull it in each week, Greg, as with a team meeting, and kind of make sure folks feel like they're connected. I think that's one of the challenges we have as leaders in a global business era. But talent density, we'll keep our finger on the pulse. And what was the name of that book, Colton, that you?
I think No Rules Rules. It's great. But I have one other eureka moment for the industry. Maybe like more where the question was going. I was in a meeting, I guess probably in December now, with one of our clients, a really large distributor in Oregon, and we've been working with them for a while, and a very cool deployment. They have a couple warehouses and they manage a couple brands, and they use the marketplace to help get those brands out into the market and allow retailers to reorder from them. And I was like, this is a 3PL. Like I didn't, Cannabis has third-party logistics, and we're doing it, and we're doing it at a large scale, and we're taking that elsewhere. And I don't know, like when we've been such an early market, like you don't, like it's mostly just like, distribution is cool, but in this industry, but it's not, you're not moving 50,000 orders a day. It's not the Manhattan world that
right.
Came out of, but it's just like I was like, wow, that's really powerful. And and you think about how people are trying to launch hundreds and hundreds of brands across the country, and how how do you do that effectively and efficiently in a new market where we had a meeting last summer. I think it was last summer, maybe been, it was last summer, with a guy who his family and him have 40 years in retail, major retail background, launching multiple successful retail brands. I'll go into all the details, talking about the ability to actually have a brand in a state like California, and that evolution of you have to have the market to be able to actually differentiate a brand and then create an audience and then do that. And so we're now seeing that sort of happen in cannabis. Like everyone's talked about brands, but like right. In an early market, it's just about product. And in states where there's no inventory, it doesn't really matter what the label is. You just want your weed, right? And you're just trying to keep the shelves stocked. But but then as these markets mature, the brand becomes important. And so efficiently taking a brand to market, I mean, it's reliant on distribution and and all the things that we do every single day. And so that was a little aha moment a couple months ago for us. That was pretty cool, and I think relevant to the audience here. So.
Love it. I love that. So we're just scratching the surface with Colton Griffin. I got to add, you mentioned Netflix in your first eureka moment. There's a great documentary that came out about a year ago called The Last Blockbuster. And if you like studying business history and kind of the decisions that were and the decisions that weren't, that had seismic impact on kind of how things played out, as an outstanding documentary. I think it's on Netflix. I think it's on Amazon and others. So check that out. Okay.
We have an office in Bend there. I've seen it. Seen that. That's where it is.
The very last blockbuster.
It's so cool. Such a great story. And by the way, the Blockbuster Twitter account, if y'all are big on Twitter, like we're big Twitter dorks here, but enjoy it, learn a ton. It popped in. It had been dormant for like 7 years or something. And then Blockbuster, it popped in about 6 months ago. Hey, just checking out, see how things are going. And yeah, that's enough for us. That was just those 2 tweets. It was such a neat social moment. But anyway, so Greg, before we ask Colton, how folks can connect with him and Flourish and which is such a neat story. What's, we're talking eureka moments. We're talking all these massive lessons that not only Colton is learning, but he's executing and acting on. Before we wrap up here, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I mean, I kind of go back to the takeaways. The T-shirt moment is you got to do it to learn it, right? I mean, that is a simple stroke of genius right there. And then, one of the things that constantly as an investor or as an advisor or a director constantly harp on is you have to know your market. And just when you think you know your market, dig a bit deeper, because the litmus test for whether you know your market is whether you've built a product that people will pay you for. So that's a brilliant discovery and a point of awareness that every founder needs far before they usually get it. They usually have that discussion after they've built, or that recognition after they've built a product and nobody buys it, or very few people buy it, or they won't pay the price they want for it. But that research and responsiveness to the marketplace is ongoing and never ending, that you have to constantly meet your market where they are. Yeah. And then, gosh, this one, fundraising is far more complex. It's far more time consuming than you could ever imagine. And finally, team. Not only hire slow and fire fast, but also think about who your team is. And one of the things that really stands out to me, having met Colton's team before even deciding to join the board, is the quality. He does have an incredible talent density there. Bennett and Juan both have areas of extreme expertise. They're both, they participate in the board meetings. They are very accretive to the board meetings. They bring information. They have a very tactical view of things. They have intentionally made their view much, much more strategic. And they bring both of those viewpoints to the board meetings, which helps us a lot to assess and improve the company. And the other thing is the board. I mean, not just me, of course, I think I'm great. But no, I mean, the board, I mean, the way that Colton has embraced advisors and board members to help shore him and the rest of the team up in terms of knowledge, Micah Tapman, and Tom and myself and Bennett, of course, one of the founders being on the board, and Juan being an advisor. And of course, Colton and his viewpoints gives us a tremendous cross-section of knowledge every time we get together to talk about the strategy of the company. And they take action. This is absolutely critical. Of course, have advisors, of course, have board guidance, but take action on the knowledge that you're given. And that is something that is so powerful and is something we see happen every day. I mean, he has actually put us to work. We recommended some actions in the board meeting, and he put us to work on it. And I would encourage founders and leaders of companies to do that.
Deeds, not words.
Amen.
I love that.
Yeah,
Greg. And gosh, talent density. You're talking about in the team. You're very dense with talent. I went the geographic route, but well, hey, really, such a neat story. It's a neat story to have seen it early on and then see it blossom and flourish and continue to grow and be more successful. So Colton, we'll have you back. But in the meantime, as we wrap here, let's make sure folks know how to connect with you, Colton Griffin, whether want to be entrepreneurs, maybe they want to do business with Flourish or learn from what y'all have learned from as you learn it and do it, I think is, if I had that right, what you shared earlier. How can folks connect with you and Flourish?
At Finally Flourish on pretty much all the social medias, so Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, or on LinkedIn, Flourish Software, flourishsoftware.com. It's our URL, and I'm pretty easy to find as well. Colton Griffin is a unique name. I think we're going to have some links on the podcast here, and yeah, I mean, we're definitely if there's any technology, we're always challenging to find the right engineers. So we're looking for, and if engineers know supply chain, like please hit us up and be part of this journey. I mean, we're looking to expand the team this year in a good way, and apply all these skills. And we can always teach you the cannabis language. We can always teach you the supply chain language. So, but if we need to, but yeah, we at Finally Flourish, which was inspired by our point of sale rollout, where our customers were like, finally, software that works.
I love that. We also call it, if you're watching this, we call it that Colton's eye roll as he said that, which is even better. Yeah. All right. So make sure you connect. Of course, we'll have the links in the show notes. Make sure you connect with Colton and the Flourish team. Big thanks. Colton Griffin,
thanks
CEO.
Thanks to you too. Thanks, Greg, for all the guidance on the board. Thanks, Scott, for making this happen and invite.
Hey, I'm selfish. I want to learn from what you've seen and as you've continued to build Flourish. So thanks so much for your time. We'll have you back soon. Hey, everybody, to our listeners, make sure you connect with Colton Griffin, CEO of Flourish. Big thanks to him and his team for being a part of today's episode. Big thanks to Greg White for helping us to decipher, easy for you to say, all the opportunity that exists in the cannabis industry, and a lot more to come. So, Greg, big thanks to you. To our listeners, hey, if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to check us out at supplychainnow.com. Brand new website, easier to find stuff, easier to plug in and engage. And if there's something not there, hey, give us some feedback. Let us know what you'd like to see. On that note, signing off here for now is Scott Luton along with Greg White. Hope this finds you well wherever you are, but do good, give forward, be the change that is needed. Be like Colton Griffin. And on that note, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.